consistency. You did it this time, so why can't you do it now? Well, sometimes those connections occur within the brain, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes the autistic brain uses the thinking conscious area of the brain to process things that other people do automatically without any thought whatsoever. I decided I'm hungry. So I don't think about, I need to stand up and walk to the kitchen. I'm not conscious aware of it. I'm hungry. And next thing I know, I'm up and walking into the kitchen. That's how the automatic brain works. But for the autistic individual, I have to consciously think about, well, in order for me to be hungry, I have to stand up and I have to get there. I mean, I'm not always thinking those thoughts, but I'm conscious of the fact of what I have to do in order to be able to do something, which means I experience cognitive fatigue.
Hi, I'm Stacy Newat. I am a speech language pathologist and the CEO at Making Sense of Autism, and I'm a student of Susan.
And I'm Susan Galabach. I am a now retired occupational therapist who has worked many, many years after I discovered even my own autism with other autistic individuals. I founded Making Sense of Autism because of my passion to not only understand my brain and how it worked differently, but to try to explain what I've learned to other people so that they're more understanding and therefore more accepting and more accommodating to autistic individuals.
So, our goal is to help you provide the right support without trying to fix autism, but by understanding it. So, whether you're a parent, teacher, therapist, or just someone who wants to learn, you're in the right place. Be sure to subscribe and join us every week. We talk about a new topic. Thank you for being here and taking the time to better understand autistic individuals. If our message today resonates with you, make sure to subscribe and follow along. We also share a weekly newsletter with free tools and ideas that you can use right away. Be sure to go to our website, www.makingsenseofautism.com. Today, we're going to talk about something that keeps professionals, parents, and educators sometimes up late at night. And I mean, literally, we're stressing about these things that happen in our sessions day to day. Be sure to stay with us until the end because we have a special offer that really could change how you understand autism forever. Here's what people in our community are actually saying. There was an SLP with over 10 years of experience wrote this. She said, I'm really feeling stuck with a student. He does a lot of masking to fit in. He's metaphorically drowning, and I'm not sure what to do. He's stuck and I'm stuck. A teacher shared, I have a 5-year-old in my class trying to make him use PECS, triggers, screaming and headbutting. It's a nightmare. I want things to go smoothly and have him feel safe and happy, and I want everyone to be happy. This one hit me really hard. A newer therapist wrote, it's like each day is either okay or just absolutely terrible. I feel like I'm chasing them around. I am maybe at a breaking point. These aren't bad professionals. These aren't bad parents. These are people who deeply care, but they're missing one critical piece. They don't have a framework for understanding how the autistic brain actually works. So when we only see these behaviors and then react to these behaviors and think a star chart's going to help or a behavior plan's going to help, we really miss the communication underneath these messages. When we only focus on deficits, we miss the strengths that change everything. So, Sue, from your perspective as an occupational therapist and as a late diagnosed autistic individual, what is one thing you wish every parent, therapist, teacher knew about autism and the view of maybe how they can make a shift?
I think the thing that every autistic is frustrated with in their communication with non-autistics is if they would just say what they mean and mean what they say. It's so frustrating and confusing. The where they say things to be polite or to be correct, and yet the autistic is bluntly honest. We see things exactly, literally, what they are and how they are. And our communication tends to be very bluntly honest about this is what I need, this is what I cannot handle. Um, um, and yet we don't understand why people don't listen to what we're saying when we're trying to say it as meaningful as we can. And if we can't use words, we say it through our actions, which people then interpret as behavior. So, in other words, if you're not in compliance with what someone in authority wants, then that's a behavior. That's a negative behavior and not a form of communication. And that's really very, um, social communication is the biggest obstacle between autistics and non-autistics. Um, and it's frustrating on both sides.
Yeah, it's like that example I said before, where a teacher with a 5-year-old is trying to make him use PECs, but it triggers screaming and headbutting. Well, that's communication that
Uh,
they do not, that communication
that's not
system
me.
doesn't make sense to them, and they don't want to use that communication system. And I know that that system is very compliance based in terms of like the hierarchy, and you have to do it this way. And what's natural about that? Not, there's absolutely nothing. And when you want, if you truly want things to go smoothly and for the individuals you're working with to feel safe, you are going to sit back and observe how they communicate and then build on it. And I'm absolutely not saying you can't use pictures or even high-tech AEC. I am all about total communication using gestures, pictures, AA speech generating AAC devices. But if we don't accept all communication and we force one, it is going to create frustration because they're like, hey, I just pointed at that thing that I wanted. Why are you making me say it? I know I was at a school the other day and the kid literally sat in front of the computer. And then his teacher said, tell me I want computer. I'm like, he just did. He sat in front of it and opened it up. That is saying, I want computer. Why are you making him say it with his voice? It was ridiculous. But that's that tension, right? That we're like, okay, we have to get them to communicate. We have to get them to use words. And it's like, but that's not the right moment. The right moment for using words is, or figuring out a different way to communicate it is if you can't figure out what it is they're trying to tell you. And like where the kid is screaming and headbutting, you say, no, I don't want to. And that's where you can teach those kinds of phrases. Those self-advocacy phrases are so important. And so I definitely feel like you said, autistic individuals are blunt. They are communicating their needs. We just aren't listening. And so sometimes we do feel stuck, but it's because we have these blinders on of like what we're supposed to be doing. But if we take those off and just sit back and get curious and start watching, I think more doors will open. And I can only imagine that's got to be so frustrating. I know a lot of people, if you try to communicate something and the other person isn't understanding you, that's frustrating for anyone. So,
But that doesn't mean that that the child is always right. The child always gets their way, and what you want doesn't matter. That is not the case. It's merely a matter of saying, I hear you. I think this is what you're trying to tell me. Unfortunately, that's not an option I can give you. Um, but I know this is what you want. So let's look at some other options that might work to meet your need and my need. That's the goal, is meeting each other's needs. Um, not necessarily one way or the other. And if what the child wants doesn't work for you, then give them other options. But at least start by saying, I hear you. I think this is what you're telling me, and I'm listening. And let's problem solve. Let's find another way that will work for you and me.
Absolutely. It is. It's a balance, creating that balanced relationship. Um, and I feel like sometimes that barrier is that because we do things so automatically, we don't know what they need. And that's where really understanding how the autistic brain works is so important. And Sue, if you had to share one of the biggest misconceptions about how the autistic brain works that people don't really wrap their head around. I know one thing that you share all the time is the inconsistent connections in the sensory system. But what do you feel like is like the number one misunderstood thing about how the autistic brain works?
You nailed it. Consistency. Um, you did it this time, so why can't you do it now? Well, sometimes those connections occur within the brain, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes the autistic brain, uses the thinking conscious area of the brain to process things that other people do automatically without any thought whatsoever. I decided I'm hungry. So I don't think about, I need to stand up and walk to the kitchen. I'm not conscious aware of it. I'm hungry. And next thing I know, I'm up and walking into the kitchen. That's how the automatic brain works. But for the autistic individual, I have to consciously think about, well, in order for me to be hungry, I have to stand up and I have to get there. I mean, I'm not always thinking those thoughts, but I'm conscious of the fact of what I have to do in order to be able to do something, which means I experience cognitive fatigue. And this is another thing that neurotypicals have a hard time finding, is that this is so easy for me. It's a piece of cake. Why should this be so hard for you? Or why are you tired after X number of repetitions? Um, that inconsistency. And then when autistics insist on consistency, that also frustrates them, because in order to strengthen those connections within the brain, like everybody else, autistics do need a lot of repetition. So once we learn it one way, we don't want you changing it. We've learned it this way. Now it's easier because that just rote repetition makes it easier. I don't have to think my way through things, because thinking means making new connections, and new connections are inconsistent.
And what about attention? I know that's a big one, especially when individuals are autistic and have ADHD. That attention piece, I am, and I know people think, okay, if I tell them to look at me, they're going to pay attention. But remember, we don't pay attention with our eyes. We pay attention with our brain and our ears. But for those that are struggling with helping an individual pay attention to whatever you do, I mean, I would say number one is making sure that is intrinsically interesting to them, using their special interest somehow in the activity. But what is another strategy or idea in terms of the difference of how the autistic brain works and how we can support them with attention?
I'll give you an example. Um, Here I am working as an occupational therapist. This was after I had my diagnosis, so I'm familiar with um, how my brain works now differently. And we're sitting and we are listening to a presentation by another therapist. And I have a fiddle thing in my hand. Yes, my gaze is on the fiddle thing that I'm having in my hand and manipulating it. And the person next to me said, well, is this boring? Are you not paying attention? And I said, no, actually, I'm doing this to help me pay attention, because it calms my anxiety, gives me a focus, and I'm listening with my ears. I don't need to be looking at that individual to be processing what that person is saying. I mean, they weren't necessarily demonstrating anything, they were talking about. So it didn't require my vision. And that would only distract me. But I had this object to focus on just to have my eyes somewhere. But so that my ears could pay more better attention and I could focus on auditory.
Mhm.
That made perfect sense to me. And yet, to the person next to me, my behavior was suggesting I was bored and inattentive.
Yes, those biases, right? I don't even know where that began, that you have to look at someone to pay attention. There's plenty of students I've worked with that can doodle and create these beautiful images while learning. And if you ask them the question, they absolutely can give you an answer showing that they comprehended the information. So some of these biases we have to let go, because when we are getting on students about, pay attention, look at me, stop doing this, stop doing that. Instead, getting curious. Oh, does doodling help you listen to what we're talking about? Now, don't get me wrong, if it truly is distracting, you work through that. But for some individuals, that is just how their brain works. And that's what we're really hoping you get out of today, is that if you are struggling with an autistic student, an autistic client, or even your own autistic child in terms of helping them make those connections, helping them pay attention, helping them learn the skills you're trying to teach them, understanding how the autistic brain works, understanding their strengths and their differences really is that framework that's missing. So we do have a course. It is 4.5 hours for therapists and professionals. And then we do have a course for autistic individuals as well. That's a little bit shorter. Both of these courses, Understanding Autistic Strengths and Differences, is 40% off right now for a limited time for Autism Acceptance Month. So I will put the link below, but be sure to check it out. All these courses are on demand, so get it while it's on sale. And it's really gives you that complete picture. It's not toxic positivity. It's not ignoring real challenges. It is a genuine, practical framework to get the inside scoop on how the autistic brain works. Grab the link below before the price goes up. And we really hope that this video helped a little bit. Be sure to subscribe. And if this helps reach the families and professionals who need it most, then that is our goal. Thank you so much, Sue, for your insight today. Hopefully, this helps all of our listeners to understand autism through the autistic lens a little bit better.
And thank you for asking, Stacy.